Hello, if you're just joining the recording now, we are talking on The Complete Entrepreneur about how to
Hello.
fire a friend. Hello, Jeff. If you haven't already done so, go to startup.club. We have so many recordings of The Complete Entrepreneur. Michael is our host. I'm going to pass it to you, Michael, to kick it off.
Hey, Colin and Jeff, it's so good to be here. I must admit, I always say this is my favorite time of the week, doing the complete entrepreneur, and not just hearing from yourself, Colin and Jeff, but hearing from people in the audience what their journey of being an entrepreneur has all been about.
Michael, I don't like this topic. This is like, I didn't want to do this session. You're talking about firing people, you're talking about firing your friends, people you know, people you've worked with for years. This is such an uncomfortable topic to have on Clubhouse.
It's a very uncomfortable topic, and it's one that I think most entrepreneurs need to actually go through. They'll end up going through, and it's really difficult. I know personally, I've gone through it in my various businesses. Is having to fire a friend or to break up a partnership because it's just not working any longer is a really difficult thing to do, and it's something that requires a lot of wisdom, and also it's something which requires a lot of compassion as well. And so it's wisdom and compassion. It's very few entrepreneurs that have been in the business a long time. It's like running startups one after the other. Very few of them have not had to fire someone they really cared about. Very few of them. And it's a topic which I was debating about when I first came up with. I was debating about, should I actually deal with this? Don't we want to talk about all the wonderful things of what it means to be an entrepreneur and all that sort of stuff? But there's some dirty, rotten secrets as such of being an entrepreneur, Colin, and it's just something which I think it needs to be discussed. Like, how do you deal with this? Because it could be that it's not the person's fault at all. It's just their skill set is no longer what the business requires moving forward.
And I don't think it's just I don't
So,
think it's
so
just your
Colin,
friendship. I think it's actually like when you're in a small business, when you're a startup, almost everybody's your friend. You're connected to these people. You're living in the trenches with these people day in, day out for sometimes years. And you have to make adjustments. You have to, either it's a budget reason or there's a personality or you need to change that position out for somebody who's got better qualifications for the size of the company for whatever reason. These aren't just your friends. Like, I think everyone who works in a small business recognizes that, firing anyone is extremely challenging and emotionally, it's very hard to do.
And it's one thing, Michael, I was thinking a lot about this when I saw the topic. It's one thing when you have to fire someone who is either just not right for the position anymore or not really living up to expectations, or maybe even with a startup, often what happens is, the company outgrows the people that are in the roles they were originally in. As the company grows, not everyone can grow with the company. That's challenging. But I also thought in my career, I've had three instances that I can think of at three different companies where I was put in the position of having to fire someone who was doing a fantastic job, who was one of our best employees and always doing a great job, but they did something that was so stupid and egregious that I had no choice but to fire them. And that was a difficult situation because here it wasn't someone, not only were they a friend, but it was someone who was doing a great job, but they just crossed the line that couldn't be uncrossed, mostly through poor judgment and just making a bad choice. So that was a difficult situation too. And three times I've encountered that, three different
And
companies.
that's related to the core values of the company, right? And I know who you're talking about, and I think we're still friends with that person today. The reality is you have a set of core values that you establish within your organization, your company, and ultimately the test of those core values is whether you hire someone based on them or whether you fire someone based on them.
Yeah, that was true in one case, of the three cases. And in another case, was just someone did something really, really dumb that they thought would be funny, but it was company wide. and it was impersonating the CEO of the company. And this was a large company with almost 80 employees, and they thought it was a joke, but it was something that was just at that point there was no turning back, and I had no choice but to let them go. And they were one of our early employees at the startup. They were one of those people that you can count on to get the job done no matter what. But this was just a line that was crossed that we couldn't ignore, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting thing you guys bring up is that there was a line crossed or there was against the values of the company and that sort of stuff. So, what are these lines that get crossed? By the way, just where we're at it, if you're in the audience, you're saying, "Look, boy, have I got some stories to tell you, to share with the community here about how I've had to fire someone that I really cared about, or something like that." Then please stick your hand up. We'd love to hear from your stories of how you actually wrestled through this thing, not just from the mechanics of trying to getting rid of them, but how did you wrestle through it emotionally yourself? And how did you deal with that? But just while people stick their hand up and everything like that, and we can have them on the stage here with us. So, what is that line? Like you talked about that line, Jeff and Colin. What is that line that gets crossed, which causes you to go, "Yep, that you're done. You just got to go."
Well, I think, there's different things. I mean, as Colin mentioned, one line is core values, right? Core values are very important. And if someone just can't adhere to certain values that the company holds high, that means they're not going to be a good fit. And even if there's someone who's getting their job done, or even if there's someone who's a friend, you know, they may have to be terminated for that reason. Other lines have to do with obviously things that are illegal, things that are hurtful to other people. I mean, there's a lot of lines that are pretty obvious, and sometimes the lines are a little bit gray, and that makes the decision harder. Hopefully that's helpful, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. So here's a question: Can should you fire someone because of there's lots of smoke, or do you fire someone because I have the fire? In other words, I've got the facts on this situation; they need to be gone. Or do you fire a person on the smoke? But it seems to me like in the current business environment, we've seen it like even in the media that people get fired or they lose their careers because of accusations, not because necessarily proof. Like we had an example of a very famous actor, Jeffrey Rush, who was accused of a whole lot of things. In the end, it went to court, and it was proved that he wasn't actually guilty of the things that he was accused of. But his career just did a nosedive because of that. And so, as an entrepreneur, what should we do? Should we take like be preemptive almost and say, okay, straight away, even if there is smoke, or do we wait for the fire to start raging in the back room? Like, what should we do, Colin?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, about that particular question, but it's something similar to that. Because we as startups, we as entrepreneurs, we more often than not don't communicate to our employees what we actually want from them. And if they're falling down, I don't believe we give them enough information. Because again, these are small environments and they are, you're in a work environment where you're very close with people. And I think sometimes we should look internally at ourselves and say, well, you know what? We need to set the parameters. We need to set the metrics. We need to set the tone. We need to set exactly what we want and what our expectations are for this employee. But we don't do that because we're too comfortable. We're in an environment where we all get along and you just expect people to do certain things. But I think that more often than not, that the entrepreneur needs to set that tone and those metrics and KPIs, whatever it is, and say to that employee, like, you need to deliver the following results. And that employee will know if they failed to deliver that upon agreeing to it. Obviously being reasonable here, but that employee will know if they fail to deliver those results. They may even self-select and move on to another company, or, at least you have something to approach them with when you do decide to terminate them. But I will put that out there that more often than not, the entrepreneur does not set the right expectations for the employee.
Yeah, it's interesting, Colin. You mentioned that, and it almost ties back to last week's Serial Entrepreneur Hour, where we had coaching was the topic, and we had a business coach on, Patrick Thean, who both you and I have worked with. And part of that whole discussion and why we feel it's important for startups to involve coaching and strategy planning early on is that'll help you potentially avoid having to fire a friend, as you just alluded to, Colin, because if you have a structured process to set goals, not just for the company, but for all the team members so that everyone's accountable, then they're much less likely to get into that position. So it's interesting because that kind of coaching and strategy sessions and goal setting actually ties right into the question of hiring and firing, because if you have the accountability, if you have a culture of accountability, then people know what's expected of them, and they know when they're on track or off track, which will avoid getting it to the point where you have to fire someone.
Yeah, you're listening to the complete entrepreneur. I nearly said serial entrepreneur. They call it, but you're listening to the complete entrepreneur, and we're discussing a really difficult topic that entrepreneurs have to face at some point. I can almost guarantee, and that is how to fire a friend. And we're taking a look at this topic. So if you're in the audience, you say, "Yeah, I've got a really good story," please stick your hand up. Don't just let the three amigos at the top here go along and rule the roost. Come onto the stage. We'd love to hear from you and your stories. And if you've got some questions like, how do I actually let a good friend go? What's the process I need to go through? Then stick your hand up as well. It's okay to have questions because this is where we're learning from each other. But anyway, it's the interesting thing I find, Colin and Jeff, you talk about things like goals. If someone, we need to be very clear with our staff and all that sort of stuff, that these are the goals, these are the expectations of you and all that sort of stuff. And I think that that's absolutely so true. We do need to do that. But at the same time, are there a whole lot of unspoken expectations, such as be truthful? You need to be truthful. And if you're not truthful to the business or truthful to clients and things like that, you're done. Is that more of a value? And we talked about that it's a minute ago. Which is there a series of values which need to be articulated to the staff? And is there something we need to be doing as well as the expectations of, hey, we've got these quarterly goals, we've got to meet them and that sort of stuff? Is that something that we need to be specific about? Or is that, the basis of society is that we hold these things self-evident? Is that something that we need to be looking at?
Look, ambiguity is our enemy. And when it comes to core values, I mean, you talk about being honest. Often that line can be crossed in many different ways, especially in sales. And if the owner wants to operate a company in a particular way, and the salespeople are not doing that because they're being dishonest or they're skirting an issue or whatever it is, I truly believe the owner needs to establish what are the core values, what are the guardrails, what are the things that we need to do and how we need to operate. I keep coming back to, like, it's the entrepreneur, it's the startup, it's, of course you're going to have bad employees. Of course we're going to hire bad employees. But I actually think that we have to be cognizant of that. So it's ambiguity is our enemy. And I think that refers to culture, but I also think that refers to performance. And there's a system called top grading. And top grading, you can Google it on the internet. There's this company that set it up, and they've designed a system around this. But basically, the essence of it is this, is that when you hire a new employee, that you set those expectations right on the offer letter. So in the next 90, and there are specific and measurable goals. So in the next 90 days, you're going to deliver, 100 new leads, 10 meetings, 3 closes, dot, dot, dot. Then at the end of the 90 days, you can review. Ambiguity is our enemy. And our employees don't deserve that.
Look, I agree with you on that. It is you need to be very very transparent with your staff, but it's more than just staff. I think it goes beyond that. In fact, with partners and things like that, to be very transparent with them. But it's interesting. I remember numbers of years ago now, I went along and hired a new sales guy, and this sales guy he came back to me after being with us for a few weeks, and he said, "Oh, look, I got this. We really messed up this particular client." And I said, "Yes, okay." I said, And he said, we've let them down, all that sort of stuff, and it's not looking good. It's going to cost a bit of money to sort the situation out. But you know what? I think I can spin it. And I said, well, what are you spinning? He said, well, if I just say this little lie here, there will be good. We don't have to pay out any money. And I said, but then you're going to have to remember that you told them that lie. And let's imagine you meet them at a conference and you're standing with a group of people and the issue gets brought up. You're going to have to go along and work out how you're going to deal with that point in time. Isn't it just better to go along and tell them the truth and have the business deal with the issue, pay compensation or whatever like that? As interesting as reaction was, he came to me and said, you're one of the first companies I've ever worked for that put their money behind their value. And I said, yes, we may be doing that, but at the same time, it's more a case of it's just easier to do business when you have the clear values. And one of them was just tell the client the truth, apologize profusely, and make amends. And it's challenging, particularly as you mentioned, Colin, there in the sales environment where it's so tempting to secure that sale is to go along and tell half truths or don't tell the whole truth, or you may not be deliberately lying, but you're not telling the full situation. So what do you do with a salesperson who does that? It's fine for in the situation I was in. They came to me and sort of posed the scenario of what they could do. But what do you do with someone who has gone along and told a bunch of furfies, as we say here in Australia, and and they happen to be a close friend of yours? You just like, okay, you've crossed that value line, or and you're gone, or how do you deal with that situation?
Well, that it is that simple, Michael. I mean, you do establish the core values of your organization. You know, one of ours is integrity over money. And we've had a situation where, a few situations, but we've had situations similar to what you're describing. And we were able to feel feel comfort knowing that these are our core values, and we laid these core values out. And we knew that going forward, this individual would not be able to function in this company based on the actions that the individual had done, even though they made profit for the company. I mean, every entrepreneur has to choose. I mean, we have to choose. We have to decide what are our core values, and I think that's, to me, it's fairly black and white. How you execute on, a firing or a layoff or repositioning an employee into a new organization, that's a different conversation, which we should have today as well. That should be definitely covered. Look, I want to make another pitch for you. If you're in the audience, Chris, Rob, Diamond, all of you in the audience, we're just having a fun conversation on stage. Come on up. Let's talk about an experience you had when you fired someone. Raise your hand. This is all about a community and talking. It really isn't about the three of us. And I know it's an uncomfortable topic. I started off the session by saying, yeah, this is an uncomfortable topic. No one wants to talk about this. But you're in the audience. Raise your hand. Come join us on stage. You'll really have a fun time doing it. All right, Michael.
Yeah, I concur with you on that, Colin. One of the reasons why I host this show is to hear from other people in the audience because I think it's the value of everyone's experience that we can all learn, which is fantastic. So here's a question then, just says hopefully some people will put their hands up, which would be great. Here's a question. So you're about to launch a business, and you're thinking, oh, that friend over there, they'd just be ideal. Should you hire a friend? Should you really hire a friend? Or should you say, well, they're a friend, I'll leave them as that. And once you've hired them, how do you separate out the friendship and the social sort of times versus the work times? And how do you separate those two businesses, the sort of relationships out? And is that been difficult? Have you done that in the past, Jeff or Colin? And when you've hired the friend, as soon as you've hired them, you thought, "Oh no, I shouldn't have done that." Has there been situations like that for you guys?
Well, I don't know. We're all human beings, right? But Jeff, I mean, we're friends. Jeff and I are friends. We work together and we launch projects. We launched Dot Club together with Michelle as well. We're all human beings. And I don't know about this idea. I know people often say, no, you can't be too friendly with your staff, your people around you. Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's realistic. We're not robots. We're humans and we want to make connections and we want to have fun with the people around us and we want them to do well. And we understand and we empathize with the people that work around us and we want to help solve their problems. We want to help improve their life. We want to help them with their career. What do you think, Jeff? Am I
Well, I
on
think
target
that
here?
yeah, so the caveat I would say, well, first of all, it's not a binary situation, Michael, because every relationship is different. Just like some people get divorced and they can never speak to each other again. They can't even be in the same room. And some people get divorced and they remain very friendly. They're just not in the kind of relationship they were in when they were married. So every relationship is going to be different. I think the caveat is you should never hire a friend because they're a friend. You should hire them because they can get the job done that needs to get done, or that they actually are qualified for the role you're trying to fill. And yes, all things being equal, if you have a friend who's qualified for that job, then that's fine. But the mistake is when you hire someone simply because they're a friend and then they can't hold their weight and they can't get the job done, and that's going to put you in an awkward situation, which could eventually, end the friendship, when you have to end the business relationship. So, and you just have to know the quality of your friend and the quality of the relationship as to whether it could withstand a business breakup, because there's a 50-50 chance it won't work, just like in marriage. But first and foremost, you should only bring people in the company who are going to move the ball forward and get the job done. If they happen to be a relative, or if they happen to be a friend, that's fantastic, because you're spending so much time. You want to be around people that you like and that you enjoy being around. So friendship is important in business, but more important is putting the right people on the right seat of the bus, as Jim Collins would say, and building a team that's going to be effective in accomplishing your goals.
Now, more often than not, though, in a startup, you don't have the money to hire anybody but your friend. Only your friend would work for you. Only Wozniak and Steve Jobs would come together as friends to found Apple.
But they had the
So there are
skills. But they had the
situations.
skills.
Was it by accident or was it by design? It's okay, guy, to do what I need to do to achieve success.
Yeah, it just broke up for me just at the end
I
there,
said, do
Colin.
you think these guys would do what they need to do? Do you think this Wozniak guy would do what he needs to do to help me achieve success? Was he diabolical like that, or is it just friends coming together to launch Apple? Hey, Michael, thank you for joining. We'd love to have you on stage. I'm throwing you on this. I just pinged Michael in. He just wrote a book, best-selling book about hiring people. So I was hoping we could get Michael in on this conversation as well.
Oh,
Michael.
that'd be great to have him up here on stage with us. Yeah, like it's an interesting question. It's like if you look at Wozniak and Jobs, yeah, they were actually friends beforehand. But without Wozniak and the as Jeff was saying, without the skills of Wozniak and Jobs, you would never have had Apple. You actually had to have them both come together. And it's a really interesting story, and look at the way that those two worked. And particularly the things, I remember being at a conference, I saw Steve Wozniak speak. And the thing that struck me about him was his ability to cope with the personality of a Jobs, and to be able to still do his part for the company to grow it forward and things like that. It was really interesting just to see that. But like it's hiring friends is one thing, but then going to partnership with friends is quite another. I remember quite some time ago, I had a situation where I was with this one particular individual. He was my employee, he was my friend, and in another business, he was a business partner. And I must admit, I found that was too difficult to manage, because my head was getting screwed up in how I'm actually dealing with the situation. And so I had to go along and close down the business relationship. So he is my friend and my employee, and that was okay. I could manage that moving forward. But having all the different sort of emotional relationships with your friends and things like that is a challenge. That being said, as you said before, Colin, is that you count the people you work with as your friends. And so you should. And so you should. Like, I remember starting Park Logic with my co founder, David, and I, and we brought different people on board and things like that. And yes, I brought a friend on board, and also my brother in law, for that matter, came on board. And they're both still with us 15 years later. And other people came on board at about that time as well. And I didn't know them. And I count them as my friends now. And I have an enormous amount of respect. And it's been a great growing relationship across an extended period of time. And I find that as a entrepreneur, it's one of the biggest privileges is to be able to get to know people and really get to know them who work with you and be able to understand the way they tick and that sort of stuff. And I find it's an enormous privilege as an entrepreneur and to be able to help them out. So anyway, so Michael, it's great to have you on the stage. It's fabulous to have you here on The Complete Entrepreneur. I'd love to get your thoughts on this topic on hiring and firing friends and things like that.
Well, thank you for having me. Nice to meet everyone. Colin, good to talk to you again. Really grateful to be here. I had around 50 employees, and truly, I loved them. And I became part of their lives. They became part of my life. And in fact, 15, 20 years later, when I got married, one of them flew down to Florida. I'm from New Jersey and attended my wedding. She's still a dear, dear friend. Many of them are. We're connected on social media. I am very, very empathetic, and it would kill me to fire a friend. I mean, I would need therapy if I did that. So I'd probably have someone else do it. But I think what's important, like anything else, is setting expectations. And I think they were clear. I didn't. They were clear on what the expectations were for their job, how we wanted to take care of our customers, what our vision, our value, and our standards were, and they knew the type of work ethic and everything surrounding their position and what I expected in order to overachieve our goals for our clients. And because of that, they knew that that was very important to me, and I was serious about that. And as long as they did that, then everything would be great. And our relationship grew not only professionally but personally, with the births of babies and weddings and parties, Christmas parties, etc. So I really think, it's like anything else, what you do up front. And certainly when you develop those friendship, those bonds, it's like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's not only with clients, I think it's with employees as well. When you show you really care and take a personal interest in their life, I think you get that extra 10 or 20% in effort, and vice versa. So I really think it's setting the expectations. We're dead serious. This is what our company's about. Our standards, our values, our vision. You have to do this if you want to be part of the company, and let's move forward and deepen and strengthen our relationship to make it even where 1 and 1 equals 3.
I think it's funny, Michael, how I basically said the same thing about 10 minutes ago,
Oh, did you?
before
Sorry
you
about
came
that. I was
on.
going to say.
And no, it's so interesting. Like I think it validates because neither of us had heard each other talking about that, setting expectations and whatnot. But let's go to the meat of it here. You actually do have to fire someone, and I know, Michael, you manage and train sales teams and whatnot, and that's probably
Yes.
an area where there's a lot of hiring, a lot of firing. You have a relationship with someone, you just described it, and you have to terminate them. Can you just tell us a story, without obviously mentioning names, of how you did that, how it went, and what ended up happening after the fact?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to when I actually fired. I had the chain of command in my company. I had a vice president of sales. I had a general manager, and I think, I'm trying to think. I don't know. Yeah, it would always be Friday. They'd hate to come to my office, so I know I've done it because I've invited people in my office Friday afternoon, and they said, "Oh boy, that's not going to end well." And I'm trying to think back. It was a while ago. Maybe it's because I only like to think of positive memories. I'm trying to think back who I fired that I had no problem. well, I didn't even fire the receptionist who was unwilling to change the tone when she answered the phone. I don't actually
I
remember.
sorry for throwing you on the spot there, like
Oh no, no,
just like
no,
that,
no.
right?
I'm
But
New
so let's
Jersey. I
maybe
can
Jeff.
handle it.
Let's hear from Jeff or Michael.
Yeah.
Or anyone in the audience too. I know. Hey, George, nice to see you there as well. I mean, if you're in the audience and you've had to fire someone before, we want to hear about your story. Come on stage. We really want to hear from you.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I try to emphasize, especially when it's with a friend, but in my experience, change almost always ends up being good, even if it doesn't seem so at the time. And almost always, if someone is let go because it's not a good fit for the business, almost invariably the business is really not a good fit for them either. Because if they're not excelling, if they're not able to meet their goals and objectives within your organization, that's not satisfying for them either. So even though it's painful to be let go and it's painful to be the one letting someone go, I try to reassure them that when the dust settles and time heals all wounds and you move forward, you'll look back at this as actually a positive experience and a positive step in your career, because you're going to learn from it, and there'll be new opportunities, and you're going to grow. And in 99% of the cases, I've seen that to be true. And even in the ones, that Colin and I have referred to, where someone did something that was against core values, or in the case I mentioned, someone did something that was just so dumb and over the line that they had left us with no choice but to terminate them. Even in those cases, they ended up being learning experiences for those people, and they've gone on to do great things and be better because of having had that experience. So I try to express that, understanding that it's really hard for people to see that at the time, but hopefully when they look back on it, they'll find that not only was it the right choice for the company, but ultimately it was the right choice for them as well.
Hey, Jeffrey, I want to tie into that. By the way, I have a good friend who wrote a book, Change is Good, You Go First. So,
Great title.
uh, I did want to say, one of the things that helped us a lot on dealing with, okay, we're a family, and if you have to let someone go, was we gave reviews. Like most people that have companies give reviews. And reviews are a great opportunity to share with the employee, listen, these are the areas you're excelling in, but these are the areas that you need to really improve your performance. And it's important that you do that and you establish again and clarify expectations and timelines. And I think when you do that, this is why it's important. This is the impact it's going to make on our business. You understand that it's a collaborative conversation, kind of ting and ting off on what you said, that they it's going to help them and help you. They understand what they need to do differently and better in order to continue to be part of the enterprise. And I think when you have that conversation, it's open, it's genuine, it's real, I think that again sets the proper expectations that if they don't do that, they agree, you're setting it up, you agree that you understand why this is important. Yes, I do. Okay, we're behind you 100%. Let's make it happen. And you realize if you don't, then probably this is not the right fit for you. And you kind of set it up like that and you give them the opportunity to make it or break it.
Yeah, I actually really agree with you guys. It's about setting expectations and things like that for staff, and these are the expectations. This is what we're expecting as a company, and so forth like that, and be very upfront with people. But what happens if you've got a business that, like, you think about the number of restaurants out there as an example, they've hit a downturn due to COVID. It's not their fault that they've had a downturn, but they've got to lay off staff. A restaurant's very easy, I guess, in some ways, because you can just blame it on COVID. But yeah, every business will have its high times and its low times. Well, a business is continuing to grow and people are meeting targets and all that, so that's great. But what happens if they're meeting targets, but you still have to let them go? What do you do with a person like that? And what happens if they're a close friend of yours? They've been with the business since day one, but you've got no choice. You've got to let them go. How do you deal with that? Not just as the mechanics of dealing with it. How do you deal with it emotionally? That situation where if they're not at fault, You're not at fault. It's the circumstances in many respects are at fault that thrust you into this situation. And as an entrepreneur, as we said before, we are human and we love having the friendships and everything like that. But what happens if you're going to have to get a divorce in that working relationship when no one is at fault? That the business needs to move forward. Okay, Michael. Yeah, great to
Yeah,
hear from you.
thank you, Michael. It's a great point, and certainly with COVID recently, we've all had to deal with that. In fact, I just wrote a book called "During the Time of COVID" because I speak or spoke all over the world, and obviously there wasn't a lot of speaking, so I wrote a book, and it was called "Get Hired, Land Your Dream Job." And what I realized was when people lose their job, and many did, that it wasn't just the job they lost. They lost their self-esteem. They lost the ability to provide for their family. They may lose a house that they saved their whole life for. So it's so much deeper and more important. And then you have to, as an owner of a company, a president of a company, and you have to let someone go that's given their blood, sweat, and tears to your business. You know that it's not just a job they're losing, that there's things beneath the surface that are so much more significant than that. And that's what really compelled me to write this book, to be not a game changer, but a life changer. So I have a good friend who is a very, very high up executive at Marriott and friends with Bill Marriott. And they had to let during this crisis go, just like restaurants. I forget the number. Let's call it 20, 30,000 people. And Marriott's a family and a fine organization. And when they let family members, people devoted to the company just to stay afloat because they were losing so much money, how do you do that? Well, there's companies, and I actually forget what they're called, that come in and help find them placement elsewhere and give them coaching and tools they need. So to answer your question, you can't produce something out of thin air. If there's no work and money's not coming in, they kind of see that. But you can offer them assistance in other areas with coaching, with tools, with introductions to help them get back on their feet. Maybe not through how they were in the past, but maybe they use their skills, talents, and abilities and redirect them in another industry or another type of job.
Yeah, I'm going to be interesting to hear Jeff's story here on this one. But I know back in 2000, sound familiar, the dot-com crash. We had sold one of our companies to another company, and the division that I ran was about 40 employees. I called them all into a room one December afternoon and announced that the company failed to obtain financing to continue going forward, and that everyone in this room is being laid off, including myself. And I think that, I mean, that moment was very hard on them, and it was hard on me. Emotionally, it was very difficult. I think people understood, but I will say this is the fact that I was able to understand their plight. Of course, I had my own issues. I mean, I was 28 years old, the dot-com crash. I lost a lot of money on paper, maybe too much money to even talk about. But these people were losing their jobs and their livelihoods, and I was still walking away with a livelihood that I could still make ends meet. And I think empathy is probably underrated, but authentic empathy, of being authentic with the individual that you're talking to at the time of that firing. I think that is important. I think that's part of the recipe, the equation, the formula, but I hate to use those words because I don't know if that's authentic, but really understanding that individual's plight and talking them through that, through the process of that. It's challenging. That moment, that time that you have to do it is very challenging. Jeff, I know you went through some big, issues with companies as well, similar to myself. I don't know if you can share anything with us.
Yeah, well, certainly, the older you are, the more you experience it. So I've been in business for over 40 years. So I've had to live through a number of downturns for a variety of reasons, and sometimes several downturns within the same company. So with one company I co-founded, we had to live through the Nasdaq crash in 2000 and then 9/11 in 2001, and both had significant impacts on our business. And at the time, after 9/11, we had to downsize the company, and this was a publicly traded company. We had to downsize from 81 employees to about 20. And it was really hard. But I think that the key learnings from that for me were, certainly you need to be transparent and include everyone in the thinking behind the decision. So you need to, at least for us, we were very transparent. Of course, it was a public company, so our financials were public anyway, but we were very transparent about the impact, that had hit us, the business we lost, how much money we had, how long that would last at our current overhead. We were very clear about all the reasons why we had to downsize, so everyone knew. We also leveraged the money we did have to make sure we gave people the best opportunity to transition successfully. So we didn't spring this on everyone at the last minute because you could see it coming. So we could figure out when we were going to have to do this. So we gave people about 30 days notice that this was coming. So people knew, and they still had their job for 30 days while they could, start lining things up, understanding. We gave, as much severance as we could afford to give. We did have, as Michael suggested, we had at the time, even though they were also going to be laid off, before the layoffs, our HR department was still intact, and they agreed to work through a transition period where they would stay on a few weeks longer than the people laid off before they were laid off to work with everyone and try to help them have smooth transition. So it really was a pretty big project to try to downsize the company as warmly or empathically, as Colin would say, as we could to give everyone the best chance to have a smooth transition to whatever was next. And by doing it that way, it was remarkable. And I'll always remember this, people were supportive. Even the people who were losing their jobs, supported the whole process because they felt like they were a part of it and they understood all the reasoning behind it. And they had time. It wasn't just dumped on them on a Friday afternoon unexpectedly. And it's not always possible to do it like that. We were fortunate, I guess, in hindsight, because the writing was on the wall. We did have enough money not to survive at the level we were at, but enough money to do this kind of an organized downsizing over a period of time and giving everyone the severance they deserved, et cetera, et cetera. So it was very difficult, very painful. And needless to say, during that last 30 days when people were on notice that their end was coming, it was a trying time with a lot of crying, but a lot of laughing too. I mean, people understood, but it was a very difficult time. But if you have the flexibility to do it that way, that was a pretty good way, versus the recent incident that was all over the news where someone terminated half the company on a Zoom call unexpectedly. So that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting, like hearing these stories at 2001. Exactly the same similar thing happened to me in 2001. A whole lot of employees and all that sort of stuff, and a nice office. And the kind of long story short, I ended up getting $1.6 million suddenly, literally from one day to the next, wasn't coming. And the business model was to drive the cash flow down to zero, meet some targets, and all that sort of stuff. And this next lot of money was meant to come. And the I remember standing in front of the employees, and so I was very transparent. I shared with them the situation, and I said, as soon as I've got more information, I'll let you know. And a few days later, a decision had to be made, but to let a whole lot of people go and all that sort of stuff. And it was probably one of the most difficult things I've had to do in my life, because one of those people happened to be a guy I'd known since I was like 11 years old. I remember sitting across the desk from him, and I said, "Yeah, I've got to let you." And I knew the ramifications of this for his life, and I knew it was like completely out left field for him and all that sort of stuff. And it was going to be really difficult. Dare I say, we were both in tears. We were both in tears for a number of reasons why, like, it's a sad situation, but also we're in tears because we're not going to be working together moving forward. And I did whatever I could to help him out, from references to all those sort of things you can possibly do to help people out in this situation. And to this day, though, he's my friend. Yeah, and I think one of the key things, I think, I can't remember who said this, was you need to show empathy. You don't show empathy because it's an easy solution and this is the strategy you need to show. You show empathy because we're human. You show empathy because you really care about these people. I have not met, in fact, to this day, I haven't met an entrepreneur who's running a company who doesn't really care about their employees. And that, in times like this, when you see across the desk and you have to let someone go, that empathy needs to come out and needs to be visible. But anyway,
Yeah,
Colin.
Michael, I want to also add in here that because you used the word respect, and I think that when an employee or anyone leaves a company, they want to keep their head held up high. They want to walk out of that room, out of that company, maybe not a hero, but at least respectfully. And more often than not, we have type A personalities in this room. We're all startups, and it's fight or flight. And more often than not, I see in real life, I see examples where entrepreneurs often get into arguments and fights with people and eventually terminate them because they don't have the social EQ or they haven't thought it through that that this person does need to leave, but they need to leave respectfully. And I think if they can do that, that means more than severance. Of course, it's nice to be able to provide, if your company can financially afford to do so, provide a severance agreement for that employee. But that does give them an adjustment period, and time to figure it out, to connect with the new company. But how do you fire them and have them leave respectfully with their head held high? And that's a challenge. That really is. But if you can deliver that, it will make all the difference for that employee.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Colin. And that's a key thing is respect. They need to be able to live respectfully. But at the same time, as entrepreneurs, we also need to appreciate is when we let some people go, some of those people are going to go down to the bar and they're going to go and to all the friends and people around them and all that sort of stuff, they'll bitch about you. They will. They'll go along, complain, and moan and groan, all that sort of stuff. That if it was my company, I would have been doing so much better. I had this one guy did this, and I counted him as a real friend. And it always comes back. It always comes back to you that he was really angry and all that sort of stuff. And I let time go with that guy. I was pretty disappointed. Like you get hurt in that process. You think, gee, you've done everything you possibly can in impossible circumstances, and this is what this guy's doing. And you can get bitter about it, or you can just let time go by. I then reached out to him, and we ended up getting together for a coffee. And I said, look, I just want to let you know I heard these things, but I understand. I understand that you were hurting and you needed to get things off your chest. I just want to let you know that I bear no grudges. We're now great friends once again. And he apologized and all that sort of stuff as well. And during these high pressure times, as entrepreneurs, we need to remember that the person we're speaking to is going through massive emotional turmoil, and they'll say some things they regret, and they'll say some things they actually don't mean, and all that sort of stuff. And don't take those things to heart. And if you do, you can end up getting bitter, and then you'll become cynical. And then those staff that are still there and things like that, or future hires and everything like that, you'll end up becoming cynical towards them. So don't let that happen. Realizing that humans will be humans, and at times they're going to say some stupid, dumb things, and it'll come back to you. And everyone will want you to go along and say some horrible things about them. Don't. Don't say anything. Treat them with respect. Take the high moral ground as such. Because you know what? Down the track, they may become a friend, a great friend like this guy is with me. He's a great friend of mine now. And he actually has run his own businesses. And he said, I never realized the challenges you faced during those times because he went through something similar. And the lack of control you actually have is
Yeah.
staggering.
Michael, the challenges, I mean, there's so many challenges around this issue and really dilemmas as an entrepreneur. You know, we face so many dilemmas around hiring and firing. And there's no, oftentimes there are situations where there's no right answer. I'll give you an example, and I've lived through both sides of this equation. So your company has to downsize. you're limited. You have a certain amount of cash. You can afford an overhead of X, right? So let's say you have 20 employees. I'm just making it up. And the overhead of X would really only pay for 10 employees at their current salaries. So one side of the coin says, well, let's just cut everyone's salary. So we don't want to fire anyone. We don't want to let anyone go. Let's just give everyone a pay cut. And if it's done right, typically, at least when I was involved in those situations, senior executives who were paid more took a higher pay cut than other employees. So let's say every employee got a 10% pay cut and senior executives got a 20% pay cut. And that managed us to cut everyone off at the knees, but keep all 20 employees. That's one approach. The other approach is, instead of having all of your employees suffer, we just need to lay off 10 people, and then everyone else who remains can remain at their full salary. And it's a really tough situation. And like I said, I've been with a company that did it one way when faced with it, and I've been with a company that did it the other way. And I'm not sure there's a right answer, because in one instance, everyone saves their job, but many people are unhappy, for the rest of the duration, because they're not making what they were making before, and maybe they're unhappy. Versus if you're laid off and get a new job, you might be able to maintain your pay. So it's a very complex. So I'm just curious what you guys think of that dilemma, and if you've ever experienced anything like that or had to make such decisions.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've had to do exactly that in the past. I was on the board of an association, and we had to chop the CEO's salary well. We got the finances on back level and that sort of stuff, and the other staff we had to let go and things. And in the end, I was on the finance committee. We got the finances around again, and we ended up giving the CEO a great big bonus when it was appropriate to make up for those times. It took a big reduction in salary. And I think it's a two-way sort of street with those sort of things, Jeff. And it's a discussion. Some people, you cut their salary by $20 a week or something like that, and they suddenly can't make mortgage payments, and they self-select themselves out of the company. So that's a discussion you need to have. Anyway, Colin, you're going to say something.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I might be the Dr. Kevorkian of this room today, Colin Kevorkian. Okay, so Michael, you don't know who that is, but I guess I have terminated a lot of people. 2011, we got hit really hard at Hostopia. It was a cloud computing platform, VC money, markets dried up, and I had to, terminate 25, 30 people. Again, I did it all in one day. And I made the decision, Jeff, that we're going to terminate these staff members that are really not performing as well. And we're going to keep the people who are really performing, and we're not going to cut their salary. And I'll tell you what, after we made this adjustment, after we did this layoff, the company performed at a much higher level, more efficient, and delivered better results. Almost fascinating. Like, I really think it's a mistake to try to just reduce everybody's salary. I think that's truly a mistake. You really do have to cut the people who are the weakest. This is not politically correct. I'm sorry. This is not nice to say, but you need to cut those people in the organization who are the weakest links so you can support the rest of the people to thrive. And your A players, they will thrive. And by the way, perform even better because they no longer are surrounded with C players.
Well,
I'd
that's
have to
actually
agree.
what Jack
I'd agree
Welch
with you,
did.
Colin. Oh, sorry, Michael. Go ahead. I was just gonna say I agree with you, Colin. Having lived through both of those experiences, in the case where everyone from top to bottom had their salary cuts, the mood changed, the morale was not high, and everyone was working a little bit under capacity because everyone had been hurt. Versus, to your point, Colin, when everyone remains whole but recognizes that they really need to perform, it's more motivational in that respect. And then, of course, the people who were laid off have the opportunity to hopefully get another job at the level they were at without having to suffer that pay cut. So I agree with you, Colin. Michael, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say that was Jack Welch, the longtime chairman of GE. That was his philosophy. Good times are bad. What was it? Cut the bottom 10%. Does
Yeah,
anyone
that's
recall that?
correct.
Yeah,
That's correct. He wrote a book on that, didn't he?
yeah, I think he did. So, I mean, listen, we're in business to make money, and we want to reward those who are contributing to that the most, and they should be the most stable and the last ones standing. And the others that aren't performing, that we're told in their evaluations they need to up their game. That's, not being cold and calculating. It's just the way business operates, and they should know that coming into it. And I just wanted to touch on things we talked about, setting expectations, respect, and genuine, real empathy. Sometimes when you have that level of empathy and you're in tears, which has happened with me and my employees when a situation was not going well, they actually feel they're actually patting you on the back saying, "Don't worry, it'll be okay." So you can actually have them help you in that situation, because oftentimes it does hurt us, and they genuinely see that because it's a real emotion. And I just think that, all these things of how to deal with it, it's kind of reminded me of a divorce. When someone leaves a company, you can have an amicable divorce. You could say, listen, the company grew in a different direction, and it just isn't the right match anymore. It was at one time, but it's not anymore. We can part company, be friends, and respect each other, but it's just not, like I said, a fit or a match moving forward.
Yeah, well, it's been a great topic. And I must admit, even though it's just been the four of us up here on the stage, it's something I really enjoyed. And in some ways, going down memory lane and remembering some of those times which gave me scars on my body, a business body. It's been a challenge. Yeah, how to fire a friend or just how to fire anyone and leave them with that sense of respect and empathize with them. And yes, there's some legal mechanics you need to go through and things like that. But it's always a challenge. It
Yeah,
really is always a challenge. And just want to thank each of you guys for sharing so openly. Colin, you want to say
well, just
something?
Michael and Michael. I think this is an excellent chapter in your book, The Complete Entrepreneur, the book. I know it's not a popular topic. It's not get rich quick. It's not one of those chapters. It really is a skill, though, that we don't talk about, and we did today. And I really think that's pretty cool. I wrote down 6 words to end your chapter, Michael, or 6: setting expectations, empathy, transparency, honesty, communication, and respect. Those 6 words, or those 6 phrases, whatever you call it, to finish your book off. And I know Michael got 3 of them. Again, Michael, you just keep the other Michael. Sorry, you just keep jumping ahead of me on my lines here. But it sounds like we're definitely in alignment, all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's really it's been a great topic and one that I've really got a lot out from you guys and do appreciate that. But anyway, so Colin, what's going on, or Jeff, what's going on with Startup Club
Yeah,
in
so
this coming week?
it's really, we're almost 800,000 members. If you're not a member of Startup Club, click on that button. If you haven't checked out the website, go to the website www.startup.club. We have a number of speakers coming on the serial launch, including a number of authors. But tomorrow we're launching an e-commerce business. Sign up to the mailing list.
I must admit, next week on The Complete Entrepreneur, we're taking a look at the other side of the equation, which is building the right team. Building a high performing team for your business is absolutely critical for its success, will require a lot of your focus. Likewise, you have a team at home who's even more important. How do you successfully grow the relationships in both your business and your personal life? As entrepreneurs, we need both. We need team home and team business. So, how do you actually do that? How do you manage that moving forward? And it's something I think it's going to be a really exciting topic. You're listening to The Complete Entrepreneur. It's for 1 hour at 5 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday. And it's been great having the conversation with everyone here. Thank you for my fellow moderators and also for you in the audience. Do appreciate your time, consideration. Look forward to seeing you next week at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on The Complete Entrepreneur. God bless you all.